You have probably done this before. You walk through a garden center in spring, fill your cart with beautiful flowers, bring them home, plant them in containers, and for a few glorious weeks, everything looks fantastic. Then summer arrives. The watering becomes constant. The deadheading begins. The fertilizer bottles come out. And before long, what was supposed to be a relaxing hobby starts feeling like a part-time job. By autumn, half the plants are exhausted, the containers look tired, and next spring you're right back at the garden center, spending money all over again. What if I told you there was a better way? What if instead of planting containers that need constant attention, you filled them with plants that practically take care of themselves? Today, we're looking at 9 lazy perennials that thrive in pots. And once they're established, they reward you with beautiful foliage, colorful blooms, and reliable performance for years with remarkably little effort from you. And one of the plants on this list can brighten the darkest corner of a patio so effectively that visitors will assume you spent far more time maintaining it than you actually did. Before we get started, let me know where you're gardening from. Drop your state or your growing zone in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing where everyone is watching from, and it helps shape future videos around the conditions real gardeners are dealing with every day. Now let's start with a perennial that has convinced countless gardeners they have a green thumb, when in reality, they simply chose the right plant. Let's get into it. Number 1 on this list is lavender. And if there is a single perennial that seems to convince people they have become better gardeners than they actually are, it is lavender. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that lavender has a way of making ordinary gardeners look incredibly talented, because when this plant is happy, it practically takes care of itself. The funny thing is that most people who struggle with lavender are growing it in the ground. They plant it in heavy soil. They water it too often. They give it rich conditions that seem helpful, but are actually the exact opposite of what lavender wants. Then they watch it decline and assume they did something wrong. What they don't realize is that lavender evolved in some of the harshest growing conditions on Earth. The rocky hillsides of the Mediterranean are not exactly known for rich soil and frequent rainfall. This is a plant that was built to survive drought, heat, and neglect. And that's exactly why it performs so beautifully in containers. A container allows you to give lavender the one thing it wants more than anything else: drainage. When excess water can escape quickly, lavender becomes a completely different plant. The roots stay healthy. The foliage remains compact. The center doesn't rot out. And the plant rewards you with months of fragrant purple blooms. Now let's talk about the fragrance, because that alone makes this plant worth growing. Walk past a healthy lavender container on a warm summer evening, and you'll understand why people have planted it for centuries. The scent isn't overpowering. It's calming, clean, fresh. The kind of fragrance that instantly makes a patio feel more relaxing. And there is another advantage most gardeners don't think about. Lavender naturally helps discourage many common pests. Mosquitoes, aphids, and other nuisance insects are far less interested in areas dominated by aromatic plants like lavender. You are essentially growing a beautiful ornamental plant and a natural pest deterrent at the same time. For containers, I particularly like Munstead lavender because it stays compact, handles cold weather well, and produces abundant flowers year after year. Plant it once, place it in full sun, avoid overwatering it, and you'll quickly understand why so many experienced gardeners refuse to garden without it. Number 2 is hosta. Now let's move from one of the best plants for blazing sunshine to one of the best plants for deep shade. Because if you've ever looked at a dark corner of your patio and thought nothing could possibly grow there, hosta is about to prove you wrong. Hostas are remarkable plants, not because of their flowers. Most gardeners barely notice the flowers. The real attraction is the foliage. Massive leaves, rich textures, colors ranging from deep green to blue-green to striking combinations of white and green. A single hosta can transform a dull container into a focal point. What makes hostas especially valuable is that they thrive where many other plants struggle: shade. In fact, some varieties actually prefer it. While sun-loving plants spend summer fighting heat stress, hostas quietly produce lush foliage in conditions that would frustrate most gardeners. Container growing offers another major advantage: slugs. Anyone who has grown hostas in the ground knows the battle. Slugs love hostas. Unfortunately, they often destroy the leaves before you have a chance to enjoy them. But elevating hostas in containers makes them much harder for slugs to reach. suddenly one of the plant's biggest problems becomes far easier to manage. The variety Patriot is one of my favorites because the bright white margins around the leaves practically illuminate shady areas. Even on cloudy days, it seems to brighten the entire space. And perhaps the best thing about hostas is their longevity. Plant one today, and it could still be growing beautifully decades from now. Very few container plants can make that claim. Number 3 is coneflower, also known as echinacea. And this is where we start talking about plants that seem almost impossible to kill. Coneflowers are native prairie plants. Think about that for a moment. Prairies are places where plants survive scorching heat, drought, wind, and poor soil. Those conditions created one of the toughest perennials you'll ever grow. When gardeners place echinacea in containers, something interesting happens. The plant often performs even better than it does in the ground. You eliminate competition from nearby roots. You improve drainage. You control the growing conditions. And suddenly this already tough perennial becomes even more reliable. The flowers themselves are stunning. Large daisy-like petals surrounding a prominent cone-shaped center. Pollinators absolutely adore them. Bees, butterflies, even goldfinches later in the season. A container filled with blooming coneflowers becomes a magnet for wildlife. And unlike many flowering plants that bloom briefly and disappear, echinacea continues performing for months. Then even after the flowers fade, the seed heads remain attractive through autumn and winter. That's what I love about this plant. It keeps providing value long after many other flowers have finished their show. Number 4 is Daylily Stella d'Oro. And if there were an award for the most dependable perennial ever introduced into American gardens, Stella d'Oro would be a serious contender. This is not a plant that wins people over with drama. It doesn't have giant flowers. It doesn't have exotic foliage. It doesn't demand attention. What it does have is consistency. And in gardening, consistency is incredibly valuable. Most daylilies bloom once, and then they're finished for the season. Stella d'Oro changed the game. This variety blooms, then blooms again, then blooms again. And before you know it, you've spent an entire summer enjoying flowers from the same plant. The golden yellow blooms may not be the largest you'll ever see, but they're cheerful, bright, reliable. Exactly the kind of color that makes a patio feel welcoming. Container gardening suits Stella d'Oro perfectly because the plant stays compact. Many traditional daylilies become too large for pots after a few seasons. Not this one. It remains manageable while continuing to produce wave after wave of flowers. Another reason gardeners love it is its toughness. Heat doesn't bother it. Drought doesn't bother it. Poor soil doesn't bother it nearly as much as most flowering plants. Once established, this is a perennial that seems determined to survive regardless of what summer throws at it. For busy gardeners, that's a beautiful thing. Number 5 is Black-Eyed Susan. Now we're talking about a plant that practically defines summer. If you've ever driven through the countryside in late summer and seen bright yellow flowers glowing along roadsides and fields, there's a good chance you were looking at Black-Eyed Susans. These plants have an energy about them. They're cheerful, bright, impossible to ignore, and they perform beautifully in containers. One reason they're so successful is that they're incredibly adaptable. They tolerate heat. They tolerate drought. They tolerate poor soil. And once established, they require very little attention from the gardener. The flowers appear in huge numbers. Golden yellow petals surround a dark central cone, creating one of the most recognizable flower forms in gardening. And unlike some perennials that bloom briefly before disappearing, Black-Eyed Susans continue putting on a show for weeks and often months. Pollinators absolutely love them. Butterflies visit regularly. Bees work the flowers throughout the day. A container of Black-Eyed Susans quickly becomes one of the busiest locations in the garden. And when the flowers finally fade, the seed heads provide food for birds during autumn. It's one of those plants that gives back far more than it asks for. Plant it once, and you'll understand why gardeners have trusted it for generations. Number 6 is Shasta Daisy. And if there is a flower that symbolizes simplicity and elegance, it's the Shasta Daisy. No complicated colors, no unusual forms, just bright white petals surrounding a golden center. Simple, classic, beautiful. The reason Shasta daisies work so well in containers is that they create an enormous visual impact without requiring enormous effort. A single container filled with blooming Shasta daisies looks like something straight out of a gardening magazine. Yet the care requirements are surprisingly modest. Full sun, reasonable drainage, occasional watering. That's about it. The flowers themselves are long-lasting and excellent for cutting. In fact, many gardeners grow Shasta daisies specifically because they can bring bouquets indoors all summer long. You get beauty outside and inside your home at the same time. Another thing I appreciate about Shasta daisies is their ability to brighten a space. White flowers seem to catch and reflect light differently than other colors. Even at dusk, they remain highly visible. A patio container filled with daisies almost glows during the evening hours. And because they're such familiar flowers, visitors instantly recognize and appreciate them. Sometimes the simplest plants are popular for a reason. Number 7 is coral bells. And this plant proves something important. Not every great perennial earns its place through flowers. Some earn it through foliage. Coral bells may have some of the most beautiful leaves in the entire perennial world. Depending on the variety, you can find foliage that's deep purple, nearly black, bright lime green, silver, caramel, copper, burgundy, or even combinations of multiple colors. The leaves become the flowers. They're the main attraction. And unlike blooms that last a few weeks, foliage lasts for months. That's what makes coral bells such a powerful container plant. From spring until autumn, the color remains. The texture remains. The visual interest remains. Meanwhile, many flowering plants are constantly cycling between bloom periods. Coral bells simply keeps showing up every day looking good. 4 shaded patios and partially shaded containers. It's difficult to find a better performer. The compact mounding habit also helps cover the soil surface, reducing weeds and helping retain moisture. Some varieties seem almost too colorful to be real. Obsidian looks nearly black. Caramel glows with warm amber tones. Lime varieties practically illuminate shaded areas. And because there are so many different colors available, it's easy to create combinations that look professionally designed. The best part? Once established, coral bells ask very little from the gardener, which is exactly what this video is all about. Number 8 is Sedum Autumn Joy. And if I had to choose one perennial that provides something interesting during every season of the year, this would be a strong candidate. Spring begins with fresh blue-green growth. Summer brings strong, upright stems and attractive foliage. Late summer introduces clusters of flowers that gradually turn pink. By autumn, those flowers deepen into rich shades of red. And then winter arrives. Most plants disappear. Sedum stays. The dried flower heads remain standing through frost, snow, and cold weather, adding structure and interest long after other plants have vanished. That's 4 seasons of value from a single container plant. Few perennials can match that. The reason sedum performs so well in pots comes down to its succulent nature. The leaves store water. The stems store water. The plant is built for drought. While other container plants may suffer when watering is delayed, sedum often shrugs it off without complaint. In fact, many gardeners discover that too much attention is worse than too little. This is a plant that prefers being left alone. Give it sunlight. Give it decent drainage. Then step back and let it do what it was designed to do. It's one of the closest things gardening has to a guaranteed success story. Number 9 is Salvia. And I wanted to save this one for last because it solves a problem that frustrates many container gardeners. Height. A lot of container plantings look beautiful for a while, but eventually become flat and uninteresting. Everything grows at roughly the same level. Salvia changes that. The flower spikes rise above the surrounding foliage like colorful towers. And they keep rising throughout the season. Varieties like Caradonna produce deep violet-blue flowers on dark stems that create a dramatic contrast impossible to ignore. From a distance, the display is stunning. Up close, it becomes even better, because the flowers are constantly attracting pollinators. Bees love salvia. Butterflies love salvia. Hummingbirds often visit as well. A container filled with blooming salvia becomes a wildlife destination. And unlike many tall flowering plants, salvia doesn't constantly flop over and require staking. The stems remain upright, strong, reliable, exactly what container gardeners need. Perhaps my favorite thing about salvia is how little maintenance it requires. When the first flush of flowers fades, a simple trim often encourages a second round of blooms later in the season. That's it. No complicated care routine. No constant maintenance schedule. Just a quick haircut, and the plant gets back to work. And that's really the theme of every plant we've covered today. lavender that loves neglect, hostas that brighten shade for decades, coneflowers that laugh at drought, daylilies that bloom again and again, black-eyed Susans that fill containers with sunshine, Shasta daisies that never go out of style, coral bells that provide season-long color, sedum that looks beautiful in every season, and salvia that adds height, color, and pollinator power without demanding constant attention. These aren't just perennials that survive in containers. These are perennials that thrive in them. Plant them once, give them what they need to get established, and then enjoy years of beauty with remarkably little effort. That's not lazy gardening. That's smart gardening.